Hi, welcome back to Cbse Board Economics. Today we will be making a comparative study of nominal GDP with real GDP or GDP at current prices and GDP at constant prices. I hope you recollect what we discussed in the last class. We discussed GDP at current prices and GDP at constant prices. This is an extension of that. You recollect what we discussed last class. What is GDP at current prices? GDP at current prices, we call it as GDP, nominal GDP. GDP at current prices is called as nominal GDP. And GDP at constant prices, we call it as real GDP. This is the first point. In case they ask you, differentiate between real GDP and nominal GDP, or differentiate between GDP at current prices and GDP at constant prices, the first point will be GDP at current prices is also called as nominal GDP. GDP at constant prices is also called as real GDP. This is the first point. Second point, I hope you recollect, we can find out nominal GDP or GDP at current prices by evaluating the value of goods and services produced in the current year with their prices. That is by multiplying the goods and services whatever you produce this year with their prices. For example, whatever the number of goods and services produced in 2020 multiply with their prices in 2020, you get nominal GDP. And what is real GDP? You multiply the goods and services produced in the current year with the prices of the base year or constant year. Recollect, I told you, base year or constant year is a normal year in which the prices are neither too high nor too low, in which there are not too many price fluctuations. At present in India, we take 2011-12 as the base year. So that's the second point. Multiplying the goods and services produced in the current year with the price of the current year, you get nominal GDP. Multiplying the goods and services produced in the current year with the price of the base year, you get real GDP. The third point, a very important point, I wrote it here. See, nominal GDP, logically think, nominal GDP or GDP at current prices may go up because of increase in prices. You will not increase the production, but there is likelihood there is inflation in the economy, the prices are going up. So obviously nominal GDP will go up. It's not because of increase in output or production. Nominal GDP may go up because of increase in prices, or maybe because of increase in output or production, or maybe both. Production is going up and the prices, inflation is also there in the economy, so nominal GDP goes up. But oftentimes we have seen nominal GDP or GDP at current prices increases mostly in the economy because of increase in prices, inflation. So keep that in mind. Nominal GDP may go up because of increase in output, because of increase in prices, or maybe both. But oftentimes we have seen nominal GDP or GDP at current prices increases mostly in the economy because of inflation. But real GDP increases only because of increase in output. It won't increase because of inflation, because we are keeping the prices constant. So you're multiplying goods produced this year with the price of this year, or maybe the price of this year is too high. You are multiplying the goods produced in the current year with the price of the base year. You're keeping the prices constant. So real GDP increases only because of increase in output, not because of increase in prices, not because of inflation. So the first point, GDP at current price is called GDP at nominal GDP. GDP at constant prices is called real GDP. We can find out current nominal GDP multiplying goods produced in the current year with their prices. Real GDP we can find out multiplying the goods and services produced in the current year with their prices. And nominal GDP can go up because of increase in output, increase in prices, or both. But we have seen mostly it goes up because of inflation. But real GDP increases only because of increase in output. Now the next very important point, GDP at current prices or nominal GDP does not show economic growth. So GDP at current prices, nominal GDP does not show economic growth. Does not show economic growth. That's a very important point. But real GDP shows economic growth. That means there is a growth in the economy. That means the economy is producing more goods, not because of inflation. GDP is increasing. I hope you got it. Nominal GDP does not show economic growth. Real GDP shows economic growth. The next point is closely related to this. Nominal GDP does not increase in nominal GDP, does not increase the standard of living of the people. But increase in real GDP increases standard of living. What exactly is standard of living? Standard of living means availability of goods and services to you. If you have more cars, more house, more luxury goods, so that means your standard of living is going up. So only when we produce more, your standard of living will go up, not because of inflation. So nominal GDP does not show economic growth. Real GDP shows economic growth. Nominal GDP does not show standard of living of the people. Real GDP shows standard of living of the people. The next point is year-to-year comparison. We cannot make in terms of nominal GDP. Last year nominal GDP and this year nominal GDP, you cannot make it. Maybe this year you produced less goods, maybe you produced the same amount of goods as you produced last year, but this year there is too much inflation. There is galloping inflation. Inflation is too much in the economy, so nominal GDP goes up and it does not show anything. It's neither standard of living nor economic growth. So you cannot make year-to-year comparisons. Year-to-year comparisons we have to make through real GDP or GDP at constant prices. And now when it comes to making international comparisons, we should not make in terms of nominal GDP. If you want to compare India's GDP with the GDP of the United States of America, you cannot compare in terms of nominal GDP because maybe there is too much inflation here. You have to compare it with real GDP or GDP at constant prices. I once again sum it up, this very important, differentiate between real GDP and nominal GDP. Now the first point is nominal GDP is also called as GDP at current prices. Real GDP is called GDP at constant prices. The next point is, if you evaluate the number of goods and services or the value of goods and services produced in the current year with their prices in the current year, you get nominal GDP. That's whatever the goods produced in 2020 with the prices of 2020, you get nominal GDP. If you evaluate the value of goods and services produced in the current year with their prices in the base year constant year, you get real GDP or GDP at constant prices. The third very important point, nominal GDP at current prices may go up because of increase in prices, maybe because of increase in output of production, maybe because of both. But oftentimes we have seen that nominal GDP or GDP at current prices increases because of increase in prices, inflation, not because of increase in output. But real GDP always increases because of increase in output, because we are keeping the prices constant. The next point is nominal GDP does not show, increase in nominal GDP does not show economic growth. Increase in real GDP shows economic growth. Increase in nominal GDP does not increase the standard of living of the people. Increase in real GDP increases the standard of living of the people. We cannot make year-to-year comparisons in terms of nominal GDP or GDP at current prices. We always have to make it in terms of constant prices or real GDP. And the last point is, we can make international comparisons only in terms of real GDP. We can't make in terms of a nominal GDP. Maybe because of inflation, India's nominal GDP may be too high compared to many other developed countries. That's all we have time for today. Thank you very much. Until we meet next time, don't forget to share, subscribe and like. Till we meet, goodbye from Saddam Hussein. Bye-bye.